Hi, my name is Terrence Joyce. I'm an artist, and we're in my studio in Venice, Florida. I'm going to be talking about a painting I'm working on, and a book and a video series that's going along with my progress on making this painting. I recently moved here from New York City, where for a long time I had a mural business and a gallery of my own. It was a wonderful experience. But now what I'm doing is making a painting. The working title is going to be Illumination. And it's about what, besides making art in my studio, somehow I always have visitors, other artists, drummers, poets, writers, dancers, actors, musicians. We get along together and we sit here and we talk about the arts as a spiritual practice. And that's going to be what my book's going to be about. By practice, I mean, what does an artist have to do to stay focused on the artist's soul in this culture, which is so about name and fame and fortune and getting yourself out there and branding yourself, when really all an artist really wants is to make art, to make noise if you're a drummer, to dance if you're a dancer, to act if you're an actor, to put paint on a canvas if you're a painter. That's all we really want to do. Yet this culture is pushing us in a way that many other cultures didn't have. There's always been a tradition, almost every culture had a tradition that the artists were, besides a little odd, they were almost like the shamans of the village. They made something that was supposed to be coming from the divine, whatever that was considered in that culture. And that's what this is about, illumination. So illumination is, I've been thinking about this subject for many years now. Ouspensky, the Russian philosopher, said God speaks to humanity in three ways: through the arts, through philosophy, and through government. And the arts are the first, and then philosophers figure it out, and government regulates it. And then we have to do it all over again because the regulations get too tight. Whatever, I won't get into that. But Carl Jung also investigated this topic extensively. How does an artist make art? What is inspiration? The word means how does the divine enter art through the force of inspiration? Through the artist. How do you be an instrument of the divine when artists, for the most part, are pretty odd people, maybe neurotic? So Carl Jung was asked if all artists are neurotic, and his answer was yes and no. He said, like, when the poet's writing her poem, she's fussing about each little word so focused that she can be 100% or more out of ego, into spirit, into heaven. And then she puts the pen down and has to come back to her regular life, and to everybody else she looks a little peculiar, a little crazy, a little neurotic. And sometimes we like that. Who doesn't want to be the center of attention? A little odd. But how does that interfere with the craft of her poem and the craft of being an instrument of the divine? Whatever that means, the creative force of the universe, God of the Christian, Moses, Hindu, whatever that means, we seem to be it. And how do you keep your soul while doing this? That's what I'm working on. And I'll tell you a little bit about the painting and the study for this painting that I've worked on for 2 years now. This is a sketch for the painting I'm working on, Illumination. It's about inspiration, how the divine inspires the artistic community to bring light to the rest of the world. The setting is an amphitheater. It's a lot of the art started in Greece. There's a kind of a cathedral section there. Cathedrals were a place not only of worship but of performance. That was part of the part. From the top, there's angels holding theater lights with light coming down that's hitting the dancers, the singers, there's musicians all around the stage. There's going to be Dante and Shakespeare, choral groups. They're all performing, and the light that's hitting them from above is hitting them, and their actions are bringing light out to the audience, to the people sitting in the dark. That's the whole premise behind this painting, and this, like I said, is a sketch. We even have modern camera crew is here, the scenic artists making the scene, the showgirls bringing the audience into the center of performance. And part of what I'm doing is none of these people are, by most stretches of culture, not always good people. So the female vocalist is walking out to the audience. Working in cabarets, I have the greatest respect for the power of the female voice in the arts. I've watched rowdy groups of people just be paused when a chanteuse starts singing and telling her life in her song. And yes, they'll go back to their rowdiness later, but maybe for that moment she's delivering them some message of love and loss and all the things that female vocalists in cabarets and in cathedrals sing about. So this is the sketch for the painting I'm working on now, Illumination. So, who am I to be talking about illumination or the arts as a spiritual practice or any of that? Who do I think I am? Or who do I want you to understand that I am? I'm not anything but my experiences. And when we gather here, the rest of the artists and I, and we talk about all this, we're sharing our experience, our strength, and our hopes for being able to be part of the artistic process that's gone on for thousands of years. And according to this painting and my theory here, it's an illumination process as well as an actual practice. So how do I know anything about this? I've been an artist most of my life. I started painting in a seminary, a monastery. I lived in New York City, grew up there, but I was fortunate enough to be sent out to rural Ohio when I was 13, and I lived out there in a monastery between 13 and 19 with some wonderful Italian missionary monks. These guys were humanitarians more than they were religious, and they had big hearts. And one of the things they did is, while I was there, one of the monks was painting murals on the ceilings of the chapel and the library that we were building, and he allowed me to help him. And I just fell in love with making a mess on walls. I was allowed to color on walls, and that just delighted me. It made my day, and it made my career. At 19, I left there and I came back to New York City, and it was the 1960s. I lived in downtown in Greenwich Village, near Soho and Chelsea, where all the arts were happening at the time, and it was an exciting time. I worked in bars where a lot of the artists hang out, and I met many of the celebrity artists of all fields, writers and poets and musicians, hung out in the nightclubs and clubs that I worked at. And a lot of times we'd get to talking, and this is the subject we'd talk about. And they didn't talk about it with their publicist. They'd want to, but they'd maybe have a couple of drinks and start talking about how their soul ached that they weren't able to make the art that they really wanted to before they became famous, or that they've really, whatever. So that's what we're going to talk about. That's part of my experience. So I've met a lot of artists of every description, and I'm an artist too. And the other side of it is I've been fortunate enough to have met an incredible amount of wonderful, giving, guiding, spiritual people. I don't know how I fell into these two camps, but I think all artists fall into these camps, and we find our way. After the seminary and many years in Greenwich Village and Soho, I met a teacher, a guru. In India, he's considered a saint. And we were friends for 25 years until he passed away in 2007. And he encouraged me. He himself was an artist and a musician, a poet, an athlete. And he taught people who came to him how to manifest their dreams while keeping integrity. And maybe that's how I got that whole thing. His name was Sri Chinmoy, and he lived in New York City. And we were just, he just so encouraged me and pushed me into showing my art as a discipline. Kind of like the St. Francis prayer talks about being an instrument. That was his whole philosophy. We're just instruments. Might as well enjoy being the instrument. And we lose the instrumentability when ego gets too high. So as I said, Carl Jung was always looking at that dichotomy that artists have to live with. You want to get out of your ego to make your art, to focus on it, and yet we're kind of egocentric as a species, artists. We all are, humans are, but artists tend to be, as I said before, a lot of people just consider us odd. So besides Sri Chinmoy, after his passing, I just ran into a Buddhist monk. He was the head of Buddhist studies at Harvard. And he encouraged me also, and he called me by a Tibetan word that means joyful accomplishment. He said, you've done absolutely everything you've always wanted to do with your life, and you're joyful about it. And how precious is that? I've talked with a rabbi from Australia who was studying in Brooklyn with the Rebbe at the time about Kabbalah and how that's about the arts and about being channeled and about the energies that come down. Not so much, it wasn't about religion, it was just about conducting your energies to do your task. I was fortunate to meet a Sufi master, and their whole philosophy is about using motion and action and dance as expression of the divine and to get in touch with the divine. So that's what I'm going to be painting about and writing about and talking about. And in the book, I haven't planned it all out yet, but there'll be chapters on how to focus the energy, how to use maybe meditation and contemplation and focusing exercises to remember who you are. I love being a show-off artist. When I had my gallery, I like being the center of attention, but I had to go into myself a couple of times a day and remember that it all came through the divine. It's a channel somehow. And that's what I think we don't have so much of these days. There's tons of literature, there's tons of videos out there on how to brand yourself, how to get yourself out there, how to, there's millions of jobs on the planet now for theater people, music videos, musicians and writers. You can self-publish, you can do all sorts of things, but there's not so much on how to keep the integrity of the artist. And I'm not opposed to anything. Artists need money like everybody else. You need to find a way of getting your money and pushing your stuff out there, because if we're saying something, it has to be heard. It has to be seen. But how do you do that without jumping into the pit of capitalism? I'm not against capitalism, but how do you not get so enmeshed in that you forget about your purpose? So that's what this book and video series is going to be about, and that's what this painting is going to be about. How the divine, according to me, and whatever I know from my experience of doing the painting, how the divine speaks through the artist to make a product to bring out to the rest of the world. And then it's up to them to do something, to accept it, reject it. Unfortunately, a lot of the book will be about most of the world will reject the artist too, and most of our work. Very little of what's produced in the art world ever gets out there. We all know that, all artists know that. You knock on 1 million doors before you sell one book, you know. Anyhow, until the next video, Terrence Joyce. You can see more about me at my website, terrencejoycegallery.com. Thank you very much.